Which one? You ever wake up and turn on the news or wake up and just start thinking about the world that we live in today and wonder what in the world is going on? I mean, you hear people saying things, you see people doing things, and if you're like me, you sometimes probably are tempted to ask, is this a different species of human being? I don't understand. I can't relate to, can't figure out what in the world motivates these people to think such things, to behave in such fashion. I mean, of course, we feel like righteous lot, I think, a lot of days when we look around us and we see the degradation of our society. We see things are moving in the wrong direction, morally speaking. Politically speaking, culturally speaking, domestically speaking, and it's like in every area of life that's significant, there is a downward spiral, and it's disturbing to us. And we wonder why. I mean, what's wrong with people? How can they think that way? This time of year, particularly now in Georgia, since we have a runoff election coming up, and so we're still in the middle of midterm elections, you probably have been scratching your head saying, how can people vote that way? I don't understand what's going on with people. What motivates them to think the way that they do? And the answer is really not that complicated. We are presently engaged in a great culture war. I remember back in the 1990s, Patrick Buchanan was speaking at the Republican National Convention, and he declared at that time that we were in the midst of a great culture war, and his remarks were ridiculed roundly by the establishment. All those in Washington, we now call them the swamp creatures, but all those people in Washington were hooping and hollering. This man has lost his mind. He's unhinged. He's a radical. He's crazy because he says such things, and he said it rather publicly. He was absolutely correct. We've been engaged in this culture war my entire life. In fact, before I was born, the culture war had already begun, and it's still raging today. And much of what I'm here to discuss with you tonight is the result of losing ground. When I say losing, I mean God's people, rational, or as Tucker Carlson says, normal people, losing grip with society. I mean, we wonder, what's happened? Where did all these maniacs come from? I mean, it's like the night of the living dead or something. I mean, these people have literally lost their minds, and yet they speak of us as though we've lost our minds. They think we're crazy. And so we find ourselves in great measure at loggerheads, and we wonder what this means. You know, when COVID hit a couple of years ago, one of the things that I believe was, I think, beneficial overall, and maybe you won't see it in the short term, but in the long term, I pray that there will be some great improvement in this area. But many parents were awakened to wokeism in our schools. And that's rather interesting, but they didn't realize that teachers were radicalizing their children and their grandchildren. They knew maybe things weren't quite what they thought they should be, and they weren't being taught exactly as they saw the world. But we're talking outrageous, leftist, communist, godless garbage propaganda that's taught to our children from the earliest time. And so parents saw this, and they were aroused. And we see a number of parents that go to school board meetings and say, hey, I want to read to you a portion of this book that you put on the shelves for my child to read and to read in public and to give, some kind of dissertation over. And they start to read the section that they've been assigned, and their microphone is turned off because those who are there presiding at the meeting say, we don't use language like that in public. and the parents are screaming with their microphone turned off, why then are you forcing my child to read this garbage? Why would you do this to my child? So they're up in arms, they're outraged, and of course, our government really doesn't support parents as a whole. In fact, the administration in the White House right now has literally waged war and is waging war against parents, against us. I know that sounds a little bit startling, and some people may say, I don't think you should talk about politics. I'm not talking about politics. I'm just talking simple facts. And if you need to know more, I'll be glad to share that information with you when class is over. But we are in a serious war where people are being locked up, jailed, because, for example, they defend life, or they say, I don't want my child being taught by pedophiles, and so on and so forth. And so they're being jailed, they're being arrested. You know, even the New York Post recently had this headline, The War on Parents, and it's raging all around our country. And I think it's because parents and others, maybe church leaders or others, are starting to say, you know, something's not right here. I mean, we talk to our children, you know, that have just graduated high school or they've just gotten out of college, and we think, who are you? I don't recognize you. You just don't sound like anything I've ever taught, or that you're not thinking the way I taught you to think, or so on and so forth. And it's disturbing to us. We wonder, where did all this come from? And how is this possible? You know, parents are actually being arrested by the Justice Department. And that's what our present administration is doing. If you go to a board meeting and you voice your opinion against racism taught in our schools, and it's being taught, or you voice your objection to pedophiles or drag queens teaching your child in school, they will arrest you, because you shouldn't say that. Because, you know, we used to have what we call freedom of speech, and it was pretty much sacrosanct. You could say whatever you want to say, particularly in the political arena. Not anymore. If you're not saying what the liberal establishment wants you to say, they will arrest you. They will cut your microphone off. They will dox you. Or, I mean, there's any number of ways they'll come after you. You're aware of this. This is how the culture war is manifesting itself. So we're frustrated. We don't understand it. We say, why would you arrest someone who went to an abortion clinic and simply sang hymns? And why would you have the FBI show up with guns blazing to arrest this man from his home with his children screaming and crying? Why are you arresting my husband? It's been a year and no one ever pressed charges, but the Biden administration decided to come after him because he had sung hymns, and people from his church sung hymns at an abortion clinic. This actually happens. It's happening all around our country. You say, well, why? That's madness. It is. At least that's how we see it. Because we're looking at things through a very different lens. We're not seeing the world. We're not looking at reality from the same vantage point. We're looking at things from a biblical Christian worldview. Now, if someone has a different worldview, they're going to see things very differently. They're going to have different interests, different priorities, and it's going to be confusing for you at times. You know, when you think about drag queens talking to kindergartners and first graders, I'm thinking about the time I spent as a correctional officer. And it's true what you've heard about inmates. I'm talking murderers, and I worked with many of them. Murderers, rapists, thieves, have zero respect for anyone that sexualizes children or that harms children sexually. They're despised by criminals. But in case you're unaware, we have an administration across the board. We have educators. We have entertainers, Disney included, promoting this very concept. People are saying we need to let drag queens talk to our children to let them know that they're normal people just like you. Now, I don't know about you, but when you see a man dressed up like this talking to children, that ain't normal. Now, if you think it's normal, probably because you're coming at things from a very different perspective than me. So let's just understand up front as we try to come to terms with what's happening in our world and our culture. How is this possible? Herschel Walker, by the way, you may think what you want about him, but he's running right now saying that as a senator, unlike Warnock, I don't want men competing with women in sports. That seemed reasonable, doesn't it? I mean, because a guy said, hey, I'm a girl. Man, I feel like a woman. So I want to play with, compete with women in sports. And so you can't stop me. And if you say anything about it, well, you're just mean, and I'm going to have you arrested for being mean to me. Yeah, you hurt my feelings. I mean, this is a really strange world we live in. I mean, what do you mean? We're having to actually defend the right of women to compete with women because a dude can't compete with other guys, so I'll just take my chances with the girls. That doesn't quite seem fair, but again, that's just normal people looking at things and saying, why would you do that? Why are we even having this discussion? Again, it comes back to worldviews that are in conflict. I remember in 1993, I took a class with Robert Wagner, and this was our subject. We were talking about worldviews. I didn't have any idea what that meant at the time. I didn't know how to relate to it. And honestly, I thought that Brother Wagner was unhinged. I thought he was kind of off his rocker because he saw humanists and secularists and communists behind every doorpost. And I thought, this guy, he's a little bit extreme. The more I live and the more I see and witness for myself what's going on, the more I realize Brother Wagner was really being nice about things. He was holding back because these people are everywhere. And make no mistake about it, when I talk about a leftist worldview, I'm talking about pure communism. Communists that are using various issues to introduce their worldview, their ideology, their political point of view, etc., and their godless view. It's everywhere in our society. And it's not by accident. It's by sheer design. These Marxists have been marching through our institutions for over a century now, methodically working their way until they've seated themselves in positions of power so that we're sitting here in the pew on Sunday morning, what are we going to do about it? Well, I know one thing we can do about it, and that is to begin with what we're doing here tonight, and that is to at least be aware, cognizant of what's happening and why it's happening and what it means. And we talk to our children, about sexual purity, about patriotism, about modest apparel, about, going to church, and, the response is pretty much, yeah, okay, whatever. And then it hurts us. It hurts our heart. We're like, how can you be so indifferent? How can you not care? I mean, what is it about this country you think is so bad, so evil? Of course, they can give you an answer to that, but they've been poisoned. Their minds have been poisoned for their entire lives. And unfortunately, as parents, we were unaware of it. We were not awake to this reality. I hope and pray that more of us will awaken ourselves and we'll realize that what is going on is by design. It's part of a culture war where people are attempting to reshape not just certain policies and ideas, but the way we look at policies, the way we reason, the way we think. I mean, to the very basics of our understanding of reality. It's all being unraveled. We might literally say that our Christian worldview is being turned upside down in a single generation. And that's unfortunate. It should be going the other way around, but this is what we are witnessing, and our young people are basically like, yeah, whatever. When I think about where we're going in our new study tonight, we'll get there in just a moment. But in 2 Corinthians 11, Paul said, I fear lest somehow as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. I don't think any of us would even doubt that there's a large number, a general population of this new generation that's coming along that haven't had their minds corrupted to one degree or the other about any number of issues. And we look at it and we say, well, how is this possible? Why are my children thinking this way? Why can't I reach them? Why will they not listen to me? Why are they so indifferent to these very important matters? They've been deceived. Someone has been working overtime to make sure they were deceived. And of course, Paul talks about this deception and how it works, and we'll say more about that in just a moment. I think too often, as parents, as preachers, as elders, Bible class teachers even, we just assume that our children are okay because, well, I'm grounded. I know reality. I know the truth. One of the things that's always frustrating about my parents, I love my parents. My siblings all love our parents. But I was the youngest of about 13 kids. And my parents just had kids all over the place. And I was the baby. I was the favorite. I was the perfection. I put an end to their efforts to create the perfect human. And that would be me. So, shut up, man. So anyway, I see that look you're giving me. But, one of the things that frustrated me as a child, my parents would talk, about so-and-so. I don't know who you're talking about. I had no idea who they're talking about. But they thought I was supposed to know. And I'm supposed to have some kind of emotional reaction to someone that they knew for years. I wasn't even born yet when they had finished knowing these people, spending time with these people, interacting with these people. I wasn't even alive. And here I am, I'm supposed to know that? I don't know that because you never told me. And now you come along, you're like, well, so-and-so. I don't know who you're talking about. Even now. I'll be talking to them and say, well, so-and-so. I really don't. Well, they're your cousin. Well, I don't know. I got thousands of cousins around here. I don't know who you're talking about. I can't keep up with all these people, but I'm supposed to know that. But you understand what I'm saying. As parents, we make assumptions. Because I know it, because I understand it, because I'm grounded in it. Well, this is my kid. They're going to be grounded. If we don't teach our children, if we're not aware of the fact that they are being taught by someone else, then we're going to wind up waking up one day and saying, who's this kid? I don't know where this kid came from. I don't know how they started thinking this way, why they're thinking this way. It just doesn't relate. It doesn't compute. So we got to be careful. Because this transition into this other worldview happens very rapidly. It happens before we know it. And that's what I want to mention. There's an older book. I've referenced this before. Some of you have it. Ken Ham and Britt Beamer, I believe, are the two that authored the book, already gone. And, of course, the thesis of the book is that we have children, middle school, high school age children, in our classrooms and in our churches. On Sunday morning, they're sitting there in the pew. They might even be singing song with us. They might be bowing their head in prayer. They might even be taking the Lord's Supper, but they're already gone. The point is, they've been indoctrinated to the point that they're going through the motion. They're doing this because mom and daddy expect it. I have to do it. I live with them. They live under the roof. Their rules, whatever. But they don't believe any of it. They're just going through the motion because that's what I'm supposed to do. But they're already gone. And this, one of the things they pointed out, and this is an extensive study, well over half, 61%, are lost before their 20s. We always assume that, we raise our kid, we teach them right, and, raise a child in ways go when he's old and not depart from it. That's a misuse of that passage, by the way. But, again, that's what we've always told ourselves. And so we just believed if I bring them to church all their life, they're not going to leave. But then something happened. Well, we blame it on these liberal colleges. Typically, they're gone by the time they're in middle school. And we're just not aware of it. We don't even think about it that way. No, they're just sweet kids. Well, of course they're sweet kids. But their minds are being poisoned to the truth. And we're unaware of it. And this is what they're pointing out. Now, from the very dawn of time, Satan, the enemy of everything that's good and right and holy, has been seeking to undermine, in particular, the Word of God. Now, when I say he wants to undermine the Word of God, it's not so much that he wants you to come out and declare, the Bible is not true. I don't believe the Bible. He doesn't have to get you to that point. You don't have to reach the point, your children don't have to reach the point where they say, I just don't believe the Bible. I just don't believe none of it. You think that's what an atheist or someone who's indifferent to spiritual matter would say. Not so fast. In fact, again, if you go back to the study, it reveals several things about our young people. Those in middle school, 77% of them believe in Noah. We're going to be studying about Noah, Lord willing, in this class in Genesis. Adam and Eve, 75%. Yeah, they're real character, real historical individuals. The Tower of Babel, yeah, 60% believe this. Well, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? But 20% only believe that the earth to be less than 10,000 years old. You say, well, why does that matter? Well, if you read the Bible and you just take it at face value and you don't question it, you realize you're really having to stretch it out to get out to 10,000 years. Maybe 8 or 9, but 10,000 years is the outer limits of anyone that would consider themselves a true Bible believer. But you say, but I think there's probably, but you understand my point here, and this is what they're saying. It's their point as well. You don't have to deny all of it. Just create a seed of doubt. Just a seed of doubt. You remember when Satan, and we're going to see this when we get to chapter 3, which we may eventually get there, but in Genesis chapter 3, Satan comes into the garden, and what's the first thing he said to Mother Eve? Did God really say? I mean, what does that question mean? Why would he frame the question that way? He wanted Eve to doubt whether God could clearly speak to her or whether she could understand what God said. Well, what is Satan doing today? Well, you know, the Bible is so hard, you can't understand it alike. I mean, besides, how can you really trust the text of Scripture? It's been translated and transmitted over 2,000 years at least, and it's gone through so many changes and transitions. You can't trust the text. I mean, yeah, I think God meant to give us the Bible, but, you know, you're going to get that radical with it to believe every word of it? I mean, come on. Once you've reached that mental state, Satan has you exactly where he wants you. You're dead meat. You're toast. You say, but I feel it's not that I don't believe in God. You don't have to go that far. Eve didn't doubt that there was a God. She talked to him, walked with him in the cool of the day. But because he could get her to think, just slightly doubt whether she understood, is that real? Is that true? And of course, Satan did something else, and we'll say more about that when we get to it. But he's also questioning God's motive in giving that directive. I mean, why is he holding you back, Eve? He's really, it's not because you'll die. It's because he doesn't want you to be like him. He doesn't want you to know good and evil. I mean, he's questioning God's motive and character. It's happening every day to our children. Disney is one of the leading proponents of the poisoning of mind. I hope you're aware. I hope and pray that you are aware of the war that Disney is waging on your children. I mean, we've gone long past the days when a man or a girl kisses a frog and becomes a prince. And, oh, what a neat little fantasy. We're not talking about cartoon stuff anymore. We're talking about cartoons promoting devious, sick, twisted, godless, communist agendas. That's what we're talking about. I hope you know that. I mean, and it's very subtle. A lot of it is. Some of it's not. I mean, when you're aware of the battle of worldviews, you can see it everywhere. These people they're a rocker. But if you're not realizing what you're seeing, you may not know how to protect your children. You know, one of the things that Ken Ham and Brett Beamer pointed out as well, of which I found very fascinating, is that young people, even though they are under assault and they are the victims of this culture war in many instances, and we're unaware of it, still among the majority of them, they want something that's real. They want to believe in something. They want a cause to live or to die for. I want something real. Where did this global warming stuff come from? And have you ever noticed, I mean, you can't see any movie or any sitcom produced today that features a teenager that at some point in that sitcom they won't talk about global warming or protecting the planet or blah, blah, blah. I mean, like just ad nauseum. It's like, come on. You got to have something else. No, they really don't think about anything else. They think about the whales. They think about, you know, these poor seals that don't have ice cubes to float around the ocean in. I mean, they're worried about, I mean, we're destroying the planet. Now, China isn't. China's not. Even though they have more coal-burning factories than any other nation on planet Earth, and they're building them at record rates, they're okay because they're good communists. But it's Western societies and their democratic principles, we're the evil people because we drive SUVs, we warm and heat our houses, and so we're destroying the planet. And they believe this. Why, you say, why would they? Well, first of all, it's been hammered into their head. Why? It's the Trojan horse of communism. I know you think, preacher, you've gone off the reservation. Okay, I'm just out of the closet. I'm just going to tell you, this environmental stuff you're seeing today is fanatical communism. That's what it is. Now, you may have your view about it. I feel like Dick Cheney, well, you know, give it a few months, it'll be warm again. and give it a few more minutes, it'll be cold again. I mean, we've been doing this my whole life. It gets warm and it gets cold, and even these environmentalists will say, they will admit, 10,000 years ago, the earth was this, and 1 billion years ago, it was that. Well, if the earth's temperature had been rising and falling, why are you screaming at us because we're driving in cars? I don't understand. There is no logic to it. It's not logical. We're not talking about logic. We're just talking about people that are desperate for a cause, something to believe in. And they've been hammered this their whole lives. And so they believe it. But wouldn't it be good if we could undo and unravel that propaganda and teach them the truth of the gospel and give them something real to give and to devote their lives to? In fact, they could live their lives in such a way that they could give their lives in defense of the gospel message. But again, we have to be aware that there is a war raging, and it started in earnest in the 19th century with the publication of The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, who put forth the idea of this theory of the survival of the fittest. And we're going to be saying a lot about that in the next few weeks, so I'm not going to go into a great discussion about evolution per se tonight, but this is where it begins. This is how the seed of doubt is planted in hearts and minds. And we've evolved over billions of years. Everybody knows that. You ever get tired of hearing that phrase? Everybody. Who's everybody? We can't ever find the credit for that. Who's everybody? If you're doing a research paper and you just put down everybody says it, I don't think you're going to get any good grade for that. But that's how we generally reason and think, and that's how we come to conclusions as we say, well, everybody knows the earth is big. I don't know that. And no one's ever taught me that or convinced me of that. I believe the earth is, yes, less than 10,000 years old. I have no problem admitting that. In fact, probably a little better than 6,000 years old. You say, well, there's no way. Just hold on. We hadn't got to the specifics yet. But the origin of the species is where it started. This idea that everything starts from a mud puddle struck by lightning billions of years ago, and here we are talking about it. You talk about fairy tale fantasies. That's a fairy tale fantasy. It's insane. And yet, it's put forth as science. There's nothing scientific about Darwin's theory of evolution. It is a philosophy. It's a philosophical worldview. That's all it is. And it's just a way of looking and interpreting reality, and that's how they want us to see it. But it's kind of like if you don't wear a mask, you don't get vaccinated. Well, you're just denying science. Well, maybe I am, or maybe I just have my own opinion about things. Maybe I just don't want somebody putting something in my body when it hasn't been tested yet. Or I don't believe that a mask's going to stop me from getting a cold or getting sick or what. I just don't believe in that. You haven't proven that to me yet. Well, I said so. Well, I'm sorry. I don't take your word for it. You're going to have to convince me. I like to see the evidence. Don't just tell me. Yeah, but Dr. Fauci said, okay, well, whatever. If you want to go that route, fine. No, I'm not going to knock you for anything you do. This is not about that. My point is, things are put forth to us as science. It's not science at all. It's just someone's opinion. And they say, well, I think you ought to do it. And if they got the power, they can make you do it. And if you're in the military, they can fire you from the military because you won't do what they think you should. This is bad. But this is the worldview and the problem that we're facing today because of this controversy, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's in our schools. It's on our television. It's in the news broadcasts. It's in politics. It's on the workplace. It's everywhere you go. This battle between did we evolve from mud or were we specially designed and created by God? And this is what it boils down to. It's really no more complicated than that. A few years ago, Cobb County, just north of us, put a disclaimer in their biology textbook. I'm sure you remember this. I've brought this to your attention before, but I want to remind you, this happened just recently. The ACLU filed suit in U.S. District Court hoping to force Cobb County to remove the disclaimer from their biology textbook. You say, well, what in the world were they putting in their biology textbooks? What unscientific thing were they putting forth in their, well, here's the disclaimer. This textbook contains material on evolution. Evolution is a theory, not a fact, regarding the origin of living things. This material should be approached with an open mind, studied carefully, and critically considered. Let me just ask you, before we go any further, does that sound reasonable to you? I mean, if you're talking about theory of evolution, okay, you want to put forth your theory, let's hear it. I'm willing to talk to me. Let's talk about mud becoming man. I'm willing to hear what you got to say. So let's go through the whole process. I'm willing to listen to you. I'm even willing to debate you on it. Nothing wrong with that, right? Well, the ACLU didn't think it was a good idea because in school, you're not supposed to be able to think for yourself. You're supposed to be told what to think. That ought to be a red flag to every parent. What do you mean? I have to be told what to think. I encouraged students when I was substituting for a period of time, I would say, think for yourself. Don't let anybody tell you what is not or what is. You decide for yourself what is true and what is not. You're not supposed to do that. That's not the way we approach things generally. Now, I'm not saying all public school teachers don't, because many of them do. We have some really good public school teachers, some really good public schools. They're still around. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying that as a general rule, this is the world we live in, and this is what's creating this confusion. By the way, the ACLU called the disclaimer a fundamentalist Christian Jesus Christ. It was a Sunday school for public school. That's literally what it was. And so now we're at a point where you can't talk about having an open mind because that's a fundamentalist Christian point of view. Well, I suppose it is. Well, if it's a fundamentalist Christian point of view to be open-minded, I'm thankful to have a fundamentalist Christian worldview, aren't you? I'd rather have that than be closed-minded. I'm not going to discuss it with you. I'm just going to slap you down, throw you in jail. I'm going to disown you. Or I'm going to shut your website down. Or I'm not going to let you speak in the public square. Why? What are you afraid of? What are you so scared of? We're just talking about ideas. So this is where we are. It's a true battle. And I hope and pray that we're all aware of it. Unfortunately, I believe, and I see generally, I'm not talking about just us here, and I know we have a lot of people that will be tuning into this series, but unfortunately, we are way behind. Parents, teachers, preachers, elders. I mean, we're just way behind on this point. And we've waited too long. And unfortunately, in many instances, too late to try to salvage our children, to bring them back because they've been poisoned. And it's not just our children, it's us. It's us. You could talk to preachers, and I have. I talked to a lot of preachers, a lot of elders. I mean, all over. And it's the same refrain. We have empty pews everywhere. People are just leaving church, in groves. And I've heard it said many times, COVID was the best, latest excuse for people to just quit going to church. And so now they feel like, I might catch a cold or get the flu. This is like a petri dish, according to them. You come to a church service, this is the worst place. You can hang out at Walmart all day long and lick the floor, but you can't come to a church service and sing songs. You can't do that because, hey, you might get sick here. You might. You might get sick in your house because somebody's going to leave your house and come back into your house. And so you're sick. It happens. We have to stop living our lives this way, but it's sad, isn't it? That so many churches are still struggling just to get people to come back to the pew, come back to church. Why? How is it possible that people that at one time we thought were very devout are just like, whatever? I'm telling you, this battle of ideas, we're losing. So I want to, with that very grim thought, I want to begin reading the text in the book of Genesis. And I'm not going to go into great detail about the authorship tonight. We do refer to this as the first book of Moses. He had at least 5 books. Some say he wrote some of the Psalm. We know that. He did write, I believe, the book of Job. But be that as it may, there's no question that Moses wrote this book. And I say that because the greatest authority in heaven and earth said so. Jesus, on more than one occasion, credited Moses with writing these words. Although at times he said it's Moses' words, other times he said it's God's word, which is also rather instructive. So this is the word of God, but Moses wrote it. And it was written, let's see, that would be 1,400 years, 3,400 years ago. Long time. Long time. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Thus God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. Then God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear," and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it was so. Then God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Then God said, "Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens." So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food," and it was so. Then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had done. He rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. We'll just stop here. There's nothing anywhere in the world ever been produced that could surpass the simplicity and the power of these words. What does this mean? What are we learning here? And what can we glean from just these opening pages? Now, I want to talk to you first of all about truths. This is just general thoughts as we kind of whet our appetite for this study. But there's some general truths that are contained right here in Genesis chapter 1. And the first and most obvious observation is that God is the creator, the designer, the source of everything living everything material as we know it. The cosmos is here because there's a God. There's a designer. That's what chapter 1 is telling us. But now, we also learn as we delve into this chapter, something that on the face of it is going to seem, yeah, when you, duh, yeah, of course there was a beginning. You know, the evolutionists say there was a big bang. Am I mistaken? Is it not true that in the Darwinian view of the world, of the cosmos, that all matter was so compressed it was smaller than the head of a pencil? And that takes a little bit to kind of use your imagination and get your mind right. Okay. All material things, the matter in the universe, not just our solar system, not just our galaxy, but I'm talking about the billions of galaxies, all combined, all in the head of a pencil. And one day it just blew up. It blew up, so they had this big bang. Well, that would be a beginning. So I think even if you're in that camp, if you think that way, well, okay, there was a beginning for you there. But I want you to think about it in these terms. Which of these two worldviews, Darwin's worldview, or what we just read in Genesis chapter 1, more nicely fits laws of science that are recognized as established laws of science? I'm not talking about theories. I'm not talking about philosophies. I'm talking about laws of science. I mean, if I take my glasses and I throw them up in the air, what's going to happen? Why? It's the law of, okay, what goes up must. Is there ever an exception to that if you're on planet Earth? I mean, well, depending on how fast you're moving, I suppose. But I mean, we can defy gravity in that way, but you're still going to come down. Once you go up, you're still going to come down at some point when you slow down. But which of these views is more scientifically sound? The one we just read, in the beginning. That's a fascinating way. This is how Scripture opens itself. In the beginning. Time. In the beginning, God created the heavens. There's time and space and force. It's all right there in these opening words. It's very scientific, actually. Not a science book. I'm not saying that it is. But look at all the science that's contained in those opening words. So which of these laws do you suppose better fits these models? The evolutionary model or the Genesis model? I'd like to share with you this quote about the law of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. It says that matter and energy are moving toward a less usable, more disorderly state called entropy. The late Isaac Asimov, a famous evolutionist, wrote about the second law. Another way of stating the second law then is the universe is constantly getting more, what's that word? Disorderly. We don't have to read any more. You don't have to go any further. I mean, what is the very foundational thought of Darwin's view of the world? We start with mud, and now we're talking about going back to the moon next year. How did we figure out how to build spaceships and fly to the moon when we just came out of a puddle of mud? Well, we progressed. We've gotten smarter. By the way, I don't think there's a civilization today that could build a pyramid like the Great Pyramids in Egypt. You know, that's interesting. Have you ever thought about that? How'd they figure that out? I know, space aliens. Okay, but we're not going there either. But you know what I'm saying? How did people do stuff like that back then? Well, they were so dumb. I mean, they were just crawling on their knuckles. I mean, how did they figure that? Okay. But this is what evolution says, right? This is the basic view. We start from simple things, we move to complex things. Now, the biblical view is we have a very complex world, and it's called very good. Okay. For instance, when a person puts gasoline into a vehicle, the energy in that gasoline is usable, but after the gasoline burned, much of the energy escapes into the atmosphere, cannot be used again. The universe is digressive, not progressive, and that goes directly against the theory of evolution. Creation, on the other hand, falls in line perfectly with the second law. In the beginning, God created everything. So I'm only saying this to make this point. with this one simple observation, we got many more to make, with the one simple observation, which is more scientifically sound, evolution or creation? I mean, that's just one way of starting our discussion. Yes, you have a comment?
Recently, they launched the James Webb Space Telescope, which is so fancy it has to basically sit on the other side of the moon. And you can see way more clearly than the Hubble Space Telescope.
Wow.
You know, they think the universe is 3.5 billion years old, where this one can see through most of that dust, and they were expecting to see the formation of galaxies 14 million light years away. What they found was fully formed galaxies.
Yeah. They're already there.
That's just within the past year.
That's amazing, isn't it? The more we discover, again, everything that's truly scientific that you can look at. I had this, I can't go any further. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to end it here because people are just determined to ring that bell. But when I was in archaeology class years ago, unfortunately, the professor that taught there went to a Methodist seminary and basically destroyed his faith. And I'm not saying that of my own. He said that of himself. He declared to the class, it basically destroyed my faith. He's now at a very liberal institution. But it was right after he graduated with a PhD, came back to the school, and he was teaching archaeology. And I kept coming back to the same refrain in class. Every time there's a question, as we're digging some tale somewhere, or we're trying to figure out what this pottery meant, or what, we would always conclude, well, we don't know if the Bible's true or accurate because, well, we can't put something from the dirt in our hands to confirm it, like the Hittites or other groups of people that we didn't know actually existed until we can prove it by digging it up in the dirt. And I always responded by saying, but we've got 99.9% of everything else that has already been proven, the Bible claims, and there's something out there that we hadn't yet dug up. Why would you just assume it's true? Why would you make the assumption the Bible's still in doubt? He never did get past that thought. The enemy had already corrupted his mind, and unfortunately, he's gone. He's left the brotherhood. He's no longer with us, and that's tragic. But that's how this works. You get that seed of doubt planted in your mind, and it's like you're not thinking clearly because if you're having to prove it, like Thomas, until I put my hands into his side, into his handprints or what, I won't believe. Well, archaeology basically is making that assumption. And I'm like, I get it, but still, everything that we can put our hands on and we can establish with the forensic evidence, it verifies the scriptures every single time. But because we haven't dug it up yet, doesn't mean we have to doubt it. Let's just assume it's true. And if we have to prove it, let's prove it. But you understand what I'm saying? It all basically hinges, it comes back to your perspective and how you are looking and interpreting reality itself. And so hopefully in our study in the next few days, next few weeks rather, we're going to be able to cover some of these worldviews and some of these ideas that are affecting really every area of our life. Thank y'all for your time and attention tonight. $848 in your songbook, please. Don't forget, men, this Saturday we'll be meeting here at the building at 9 a.m. And yeah, I'll be feeding you again because I'm going to be rolling out the dough and making the biscuits myself. Huh? And they're going to rise this time. And we'll have something for you to eat. But we need all of the men here Saturday morning. It's not just a fellowship meal. It's also a men's training class and business meeting. We do have a lot to plan for next year. This will be a very critical time and meeting. So please, 9 o'clock Saturday morning. We'll try to have you out of here before the championship game, of course. Dorcas pantry items. Again, thank you for the plastic bags that were donated. They are running out our ears and out. They run out the back door, literally. We had to kind of slam them in the back door to keep them from going all over the yard. But we have plenty of plastic bags. Thank you for those. Right now we need cereal, individual oatmeal and grit packets, canned fruit, crackers, macaroni and cheese. Those are items that we desperately need at this time. Don't forget the next Widowhood Fellowship will be Tuesday the 20th at 11:30. If you can help in spreading the word about this good work, please feel free to use the flyers on the table in the foyer. If you'd like to help in donating food for the luncheon, please see Deanna. Did Granny go home yet? So she has gone home from rehab. I'm glad to announce that. At least she's back home. I know she'll be happier there. Frederick and Barbara Roberts, of course, are asking us to keep them on our prayer list. Also, David Bean is on our prayer list. I know your mother was able to be here today, Donna, but she continues to improve, I assume. She's doing some better. My mother's doing better. I know some of you are asking about her from Sunday. She did have one of her spells. She's okay, but her and my father both are not feeling well today. I don't think it's related, but neither one of them are not feeling well enough to be here tonight. So please remember them. There are a number of people that are still fighting the crud and other things. The list is quite long. Please remember those. Anyone else we need to mention on our prayer list that I might have overlooked? All right. 848, is that correct? In our psalm book. We didn't get there tonight, but I had planned to discuss tonight one of the truths from Genesis chapter 1 is that because there is a creator and we are made in his image, we are therefore accountable to him. We're accountable for our actions. When they first sinned in the garden, God called Adam and Eve to account for what they had done and pronounced proper punishment accordingly based on what they had done because he held them accountable. He holds us accountable. And one day we all will stand before his judgment seat and we all will be judged based on the choices we've made in the body, in this life. We're about to sing a song of invitation and encouragement. For anyone present who's never obeyed the gospel, this would be the perfect time. If you need to be restored to your rightful place among God's people, this would be the perfect time. If we can help you in any way, please don't fear to let that need be known. Right now, while together we stand and as we sing.